My name is Jackson Davies. If you look at one of those drop-down boxes on the websites, I am 60 and over. Because after that, it just disappears. You go through the whole thing, and it's just 60 and then over. Your history. I grew up in a small town in central Alberta. Actually, I lied. It was a city. Alberta needed 10 cities to become a province in 1905, so they chose Wetaskiwin. So it was a city with like 3,000 people. It should have been a village. Grew up on a street called Diaper Avenue. The reason Diaper Avenue is like wartime houses. After the war, what the government did is they gave houses at a really low cost to veterans. My dad fought in the Second World War and was wounded, and so we grew up on this street of wartime houses. It was nothing, wasn't the mean streets, it was the happy streets. There was no gangs, there was no, there was no anything like that other than, getting run over by a car playing road hockey in the winter when you didn't get out of the way fast enough. There really wasn't much in that area of, growing up on the mean streets. It was the prairies. Everybody, they were all, that whole street they were working parents. My father worked for the Northwest Utilities, which is kind of like a natural gas company here, I guess, and, laborer, worked his way up to a foreman. Mom was, at that time, a stay-at-home mom. That was just a thing that they did, and I would just, every morning, walk my 8 or 9 blocks to the school. And that was it. Everything was in the neighborhood, and walk back with, used to run back at noon to have lunch. That way I could watch the Three Stooges on television. So that probably was my whole start in physical abusive humor. Summertime, a million kids to play with, crazy people in the neighborhood. The guy built a giant slingshot once. His name was Joe Tebow, and we used to, first of all, we used to kind of rocket big rocks and then baseballs, and then we tried the occasional little kid. So it was, it was a cool neighborhood. Only traumatic experience happened when I was about 7 years old and I got run over by a car on my way to school. Wasn't really hurt all that much, but it was winter and it was a big car and it just ran over me. So I do have memories of peeking out from underneath the car when everyone's wondering where the hell I am. So that was my only traumatic, if that could be called a traumatic experience. 1967. I was just a teenager going down to San Francisco. All of a sudden my eyes were open, going from a small, driving with 4 guys down to at that time where everything was happening, right in San Francisco. The whole world was changing. They were fighting against the war in Vietnam. I was down in the States that summer where there was, there was shootings and there was people protesting against it. It was the era of, the free love and the dope. It was all happening, and it was all the base of it. The epicenter was San Francisco. And to be a real young kid, certainly hardly not old enough to even buy a pack of smokes, to be in the middle of all this was an eye-opener for a kid from a small town, and it probably opened my eyes to say, I got to get out of that little town. I've got to embrace the world. I try to be courageous. I try not to regret anything, but also I try to embrace it. Last thing you want to do in life is say, I should have. It's worth it to take the chance and do some of those things. But I got a couple of should-haves that I won't share with you. So that was it. Then moved out to Vancouver. Actually, before my last year at the Citadel, so I was about 21, and then I did regional theater. That's what most of the actors did. You do theaters, in that case, some in Vancouver, some in Edmonton, some in Calgary, some in the Prairies, and then Sudbury, Halifax. Most of the major theaters in Canada, I did, and that was a great job, touring around and doing shows. 23, 24, I got a chance to do a TV series. I started off with like 1 episode, 2 episodes a year. Then I ended up doing that for 16 years during the filming season. So I would do that. The other time, probably 5 months of the year, I would do other American TV shows. I would do theater. I tried to do a stage show every year. So that was 23 to 40. Boom, So 17-year period that was taken care of. And then after that, I just did a lot of American TV series. I started doing a lot more writing. All the times that I was written, I also had a production company that would do commercials. So I would do commercials for companies all across Canada, write, create the commercials, write, act in some of them. Sometimes I didn't, sometimes I just directed them. And then did a whole bunch of things called industrial films. And then got into a bit more production. I produced a couple of movies, 2 or 3 movies, wrote a couple of movies. I did a couple of movies of the week, and then kind of changed gears again, that maybe I, again, tired a bit more of that production side of it. And then I got an opportunity. Someone said, they need someone to substitute teach for at a university. And I said, well, I don't have a master's. I hardly have, a high school diploma. They said, oh, let's just be for a while. Don't worry about it. So that was 10 or 12 years ago. And I'm still not worrying about it. Still have a couple of projects that I'm working on. I'm very advocate for the arts. I do vice president of the Actors Union. I was vice chair of the BC Arts Council, being involved in the political beast of trying to get more work for Canadian actors, for BC actors in BC. I've probably been thrown out of every major studio in Canada because I whine and complain about that, but that's just who I am. I'm a firm believer in we should embrace our own. Just the other night there was a Canadian award show for film and TV, which again we had to bring up a host Canadian who lives in LA. He was very sad to say that he really didn't want to leave. You'll find that most Canadian actors, well, not most, a percentage of them who go down there because they're not working here. So, bigger field. As Michael J. Fox said, if you're a lumberman, you go where there's trees. There are certain people that you meet when they're just starting out their career, and it takes you about 30 seconds to figure out they're going to be, they're fabulous. Fruza Balk was one who I played her dad in this movie, and now, she's a wonderfully talented lady. And Michael J. Fox, I met him when he was 15 years old. I remember when he got his driver's license. And, he was so personable and charming and talented. You'd fall in love with him in a second, and that's the type. And we became, good friends when he started out the business, and I, helped him out a little bit. But guy that talented, you don't have him. You just kind of push in a certain direction, and he goes. Great guy, a warrior. Had some interesting. I won't even call them difficult. He's had some challenges in his life. He's handled them well. He's the most optimistic person you'll ever meet. And anyone who has Parkinson's and says that, I'm okay with that and I'm going to make it, I'm going to do what I can to. Basically, here's a guy that shows you what type of an optimist he is. Once he got Parkinson's, he thought he could find a cure. Now that's not arrogance. That's just being optimistic and said, okay, if I can raise $100 million, maybe we can cure this in my lifetime. Still thinks that. Still raising hundreds of millions of dollars. And are we closer? I hope they are. But he will just keep plugging away. His mom's very, very similar to my mom in attitude. Supports all her kids, no matter what, not just Michael. Michael's got a sister who's a great actress and director now and moved to Regina from Toronto, but supports all the kids and just a lovely, lovely person. Very similar, even in appearance, to my mom, which is kind of fun. Sports figures, that's a neat part about my life, having played with ex-NHL guys, that all of a sudden there are guys that you had their poster up. You had their poster up in your room and you're playing hockey with them and having a beer, or in one case sitting in a sauna with a Whistler, and you go, oh my God, that's Stan Mikita. Jeez, that's Gordie Howe. It's they're having a beer and asking me questions. So that's that part is cool. I think one of the reasons I wanted to teach, and I love this opportunity, is that I mean, it's sure you want to, you know, empower students to be actors and take that. But I think it's more important for me to empower them to be decent human beings. You're going to be a member of this human race, and it's how you go about that really, really is your legacy. And if I can make students think about that, if I can make students think that I want them to get involved in making a difference in the community, which they can. I have, and maybe I'm getting a little tired, but I want someone else to pick up those fights. I want them to fight for Canadian content. I want them to fight for not being swallowed up by this incredible machine we have to the south of us called United States of America. We're in a business where people expect you to leave. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, well, why didn't you go to the Hollywood? When are you going to go? It went from when are you going to Hollywood to why didn't you go? That shouldn't be our defining moment as talent in this thing. It should be how you're respected here.